I just want to remind people, hey, throw those questions up there. Let's just start off by throwing some comments. Just want to know the audience is in there so we can overcome the paranoia of starting these lives and making sure that people are able to see us, able to engage, able to attend this live. So throw those comments in there. And like always, we're going to get right into it. There's no fluff here. If you've seen any of my videos, you know I like to just kick it off and get started. So as you come in, throw in questions right away. We want to make sure that this is super engaging, super exciting, and fun for people. So what I like to do in these lives is I like to do just a really, really quick recap of what happened yesterday. And so thanks, Eric, for chiming in. And so what happened yesterday? Let's talk through it. So with all the videos that get released on Tuesday, there's some complexity. They can be, we get into the weeds a little bit, just to put it nicely. And so I would just want to do a quick recap. And then again, we can dive into questions, and Eric is here to fill in some questions from our Slack group. It's going to be really good content just so that we can keep the flow going. So from yesterday, I didn't really want to use the word compartmentalizing, but that's really one of the best keys and tips and tricks and strategies for when you're practicing. Because like anything, when we try and really tackle something that's kind of big and we try and do it all at once and we try and throw all that information in there or just try and tackle it without really kind of honing into the specific pieces that are going to really make it great, then it's going to be challenging. And so there's so much coaching and feedback out there that says, hey, use the STAR method for behavioral answers. And it's a situation and it's actions and results. Or for open-ended questions, you need to clarify and really think through it and solve for it. But how do we break these things into smaller pieces is just going to be absolutely critical for your success. If you can fine tune any of the components, you'll instantly become a better interviewer. And that's why I love even focusing on, hey, Dinesh, thanks for showing up. That's one of the reasons why I focus on something really, really simplistic like the situation. We think, oh, well, like we need to get the whole answer right. Yeah, but if you're failing in the situation, for example, it's really not going to set the right tone for the rest of your answer. So as you're practicing, as you're going through this prep, just think, what's the one thing I can do today that's really going to make my answers a little bit better? And this goes back to a lot of what Ira and I talk about as entrepreneurs is if we could just get one thing done each day, then we'd have a great day. Same way with your practice and your prep. Just focus on one thing, maybe one component of your answer. And as you get better in that one component, it's going to give you that awesome confidence to keep moving forward because you can kind of see it. And one last analogy that I'll give, it's like the person who starts the new year and wants to lose a little bit of weight. And what happens for most people? Well, for most people, they start going to the gym for 2 hours a day. They start eating only salads, or they go vegetarian or vegan. And these are all huge life shifts. And they give up after a week or 2 weeks or even a month. And so think about your interview practice in the same way. If you do little pieces, if you just focus on little items, it won't seem quite as overwhelming and you'll have greater success. Okay, that's my recap. Let's dive right into questions. And please don't be shy. We are here to answer your questions. These sessions only have one focus. That's to interact, engage, and make sure that you are getting value and that we are growing and building this community and making sure that you have the data and information to arm you to have success. So first question, I'm going to throw this one right up here. So the first question from the website, I'd like to know what are some questions you would ask for a project coordinator role? Okay, so if we're talking about a project coordinator role, we really want to focus on one of the big words in there, which is coordination. How do you work across teams? How do you work with others? And everything's going to correlate back into following this philosophy and this mindset of your interviewer can't really see how you coordinate if you just say, hey, I talked to Sue, Jane, and Bob, and we figured it out and things went forward really, really well. The real goal here and the path here is to give insight into how you collaborate with others. So, what did you do in that room? Did you whiteboard? Did you create a presentation? Did you have action items? Did you have a follow up plan? Coordination is all about your ability to move across multiple items. Also, a big one, and this is for everybody, this casts a huge wide net. When you're in a coordination role, prioritization, absolutely critical for your success. How do you prioritize? How do you prioritize when you have competing priorities, right? And you're going to get that kind of question all the time. So, how do you work with others? How do you prioritize? And how do you really create processes and systems to streamline and make things better? So, systemizing anything is going to be absolutely fantastic for your success. One of the items that is great, especially in our behavioral answers, is anytime we can talk about anything that was repeatable. The repeatable stuff is awesome because it creates such a great visual for you and how you problem solve and your legacy piece. So I really want you to think about that legacy component, going to be so critical for your success because I want to hire the people who don't do something great once. I feel like we can all do something great once, but it's the great things we did within that one great thing that were repeatable that led to multiple great things. Little sidetrack there, but I hope that helps. Okay. So, how would you use the CFS method for a senior role, customer success manager? Okay, so for anybody who's hopped on, just not familiar with the CFS method, it's clarify, framework, solution. This casts a pretty wide net. This is going to be for about 90% of our open-ended questions, 95% of our open-ended questions. This methodology works and it works really well. Helps us stay structured, organized, and deliver the right level of detail. So for a senior level role, it is absolutely no different. So we try and kind of differentiate by position, by level of role. Let's scrap all that stuff. If we can do the basics well, it doesn't matter if you're going after a CEO role or a project coordinator role. So the level of the role is much less important than understanding how the methodology works. So customer success. So as a customer success manager, obviously new versus existing, everybody knows I love this item, but we got to establish where we're at in that customer relationship. Is it a brand new relationship? They've been working with the organization for 3 years. Do I have a previous relationship with them? Yes or no? I absolutely want to know who my stakeholder is because that could vary. The stakeholder for a customer success manager could vary organization to organization. It could be another salesperson. It could be somebody in marketing. Like we just don't know. On end side, we don't know. So the next question would be industry. Because if I'm thinking about a customer success role, I want to know industry. Banking, healthcare, it's going to be way more regulated than something like retail, e-commerce. So that would be helpful. And then customer success, where are they at in their journey? Where are they at in their cloud journey, their advertising journey, whatever that journey might be, that still correlates back to that new or existing. And that's why that's such a fantastic question. But if we can think about the journey and where they are, we'll know how to guide and help them. Why are we doing all this? This is the clarifying part of how you might handle a question for a customer success manager. Obviously, with the framework, it's going to be a little bit of a hybrid. So you're going to be thinking about operational, like goals and objectives, historical data, resources, scope and scale, that kind of stuff. And then you'll be thinking maybe a little bit more on their side. So you might want to think about how they scale, how available it is for them from a cost perspective, a security perspective, et cetera. And then in the solution, just have that customer lens, pick a subject and dive really, really deep. Dive deep into how you would help that client move forward in whatever facet it is, whatever the specificity of the role, it will lead to tremendous success. I hope that helps. Okay. All right, Ankit. What are some questions you would ask about a project done by a candidate? What are some questions you would ask about a project done by a candidate? I'm going to kick that back to you. I'm not 100% sure. What are some questions you would ask a project done by a candidate? Are we trying to get into the example-based answering, Ankit? Why don't you go ahead and follow up with that question? And obviously, as people are coming on, we love questions, so don't be shy to throw them up there. We really want to hear and figure out like what's top of mind for you. What are you thinking through? Because it's just going to be super valuable for us to have a dialogue. It's the one time a week that we get to interact and engage. But Ankit, let me try and tackle it while you're writing in your follow up. So, what are some questions you would ask about a project done by a candidate? I'd want to know what type of projects they've done that were really process focused. I'd probably want to know something that's going to be a little bit more strategy focused. I'd probably want to know something that's a little bit more on the collaboration side of things. And then, of course, technology. These are all going to be questions that I'm going to ask to really understand how you hit all facets. And I know we've talked a lot about this, but let's go back into that collaborative piece. The trend is hybrid roles. This, if you were to look at the trends of what like a Google or a Facebook or an Apple hired 5, 10 years ago as compared to what they hire now, less software engineers, more customer engineers, more sales focused engineers, more people who have that high architects, more people who have that hybrid skill set. The hybrid skill set, this is what these companies are hiring for now. So this is why I hope that you're getting value out of this, because the soft skills are ultimately what's going to get you the job. Yeah, you got to know the tech, of course, but this hybrid model, it's only going to continue and grow. And if we were to flash forward 5 years from now, the number of software engineers that are hired, it's going to go down and down and down. Yeah, we got to have the people who can do the front end, back end, full stack coding. But the reality is that the people who can be technical and also collaborate internally and externally, those are the people who are going to have tremendous success in their career. So I know I kind of went off, Ankit, but I hope that helps. Okay. All right. Let's go to Eric's next question. Okay. I was told that I was moving forward to the offer stages, but hiring committee needed to review my application. Yeah. So hiring committee is that step before the offer stage. So we're always going to have to go and get through hiring committee, and then the offer stage is just another bar. It's one of the many, many layers of the Google hiring process, and it just takes a little bit of time. But they are doing more of a heavier review of the application. That's a little bit newer. That's been happening over the last year or two. And so they're getting a little bit more into the weeds of some more background information. And that's the feedback I'm getting internally. So it's just a part of the process. They re-asked me some basics and then some detailed information around quota achievement and comp requests. Okay, sorry, this is correlated back to that question. So absolutely, sometimes they're going to want some additional information. For some reason, hiring committee is reviewing comp now, which I just don't really understand. I don't think it's any of their business, and I don't think it should have an impact at all. So I don't know why they see that data. I can't really figure out why they made that move, and I will have a lot of commentary on some of the moves they make. Some of it's positive, and some of it I don't believe is positive. And hiring committee should not be looking at compensation. It should not matter. It's not important to them. They should be determining whether you're a fit for the organization for now and for the long term. Okay, this question comes up a lot. We're going to cover it really quickly because it's pretty much on a weekly basis, and I want to make sure we address it, but move on. What are the chances of passing hiring committee? Let's just say for ease, it's a third across the board. So a third get yes, a third get maybe, a third get no. Is this the case? No, it's probably a little higher on the yes. It's probably closer to 40% on the yes, 20% on the maybe, which means you'd have to do at least one more interview, and then about 40% on the no. There are slam dunks. There are people who go in, Jane interviewed, and she just crushed it. And hiring committee doesn't need to really spend a lot of time talking about Jane because Jane got all hires or strong hires. Jane's awesome. Jane's a good fit for the organization. Whereas with Bob, the feedback was a little bit mixed. He crushed it in some areas, not as strong as other areas. There might have been a red flag in there. And hiring committee needs to sit and go through all the feedback and really discuss it. And It will also vary role to role. And I think, as I mentioned last week, software engineers, lower pass rate through hiring committee because they cast a wider net, whereas program managers, maybe product managers, maybe there's a little higher pass through rate. Maybe it's as high as 50% because they know the bar of hiring committee and recruiters don't want to put people in hiring committee who aren't going to pass. Now, one of the quick things to understand is with hiring committee as a recruiter, yeah, you're going to take the risk. If somebody's borderline, you're going to take them to hiring committee every time because you don't know. So if somebody's pretty close, you're not going to say, "Ooh, I'm going to reject them." You're going to go to hiring committee because you want to see if they can pass the bar. Just something to be aware of. Hope that helps. Okay. All right, Dinesh. In technical rounds, we generally start with a brute force approach, then for an optimized solution. I don't know if that's a question, but the brute force piece, I wouldn't say brute force. I would say maybe go in with a little bit of a softer tone because we got to clarify, even on some of the technical questions, like a system design question, I'm absolutely getting some clarification around the direction. I'm not making a ton of assumptions. So brute force, not really sure that I would necessarily take that path. I might come in with a little bit of a softer tone because the beginning can be exploratory. Now, hey, if it's a straight technical question, yeah, we want to come in with some strength. But you don't want to just come in and have the solution and then fix it later. We want to come and think through the solution and optimize as we go along. So the brute force, maybe not quite so much. And if you want to throw back in a comment, we can talk a little bit more about it. Okay. What if I already know the optimized solution? Should I start with brute force or just tell them the optimized solution? Do you know the optimized solution would be a better question. Do you really know what they're trying to get out of the question? Because usually, even with technical there's multiple paths you can take. So yeah, if you know the optimized solution, I want you to go down that path, but I don't want you to make the assumption that they had one specific lens or area that they wanted you to take it in. They might have actually had a different idea in their mind, and we don't know. So it's just, the reason why we clarify items is, let's take Sue. Sue's always our favorite fake interviewer. And with Sue, let's just say for a moment, Sue just had a specific interaction. Something just happened with Sue. Now, Sue comes into that interview and she's a human being and she has a specific focus in her mind, and you give an opposite answer or you head in a direction that Sue wasn't really attached to. No matter how optimized your solution is, it may not connect with Sue because Sue had something completely different in mind because something just happened to her. So we don't know what our interviewers are thinking. So it's just a great way to connect and have that back and forth. And again, as we've mentioned a lot, the people skills are getting more and more important. So let's make sure we focus in on what our interviewer wants, focus in on their agenda, and not assume that we know all the answers, even if we're pretty sure we do. I hope that helps. Okay. Behavioral answer, how long should the answer be? Okay, yes. So let's talk through this one. I do have an ideal time, but I want you to basically call BS on me and say, hey, look, like that's not the right amount of time. And here's why. Nobody can tell you the right length of time. There's so much data and input out there to say it should be X or it should be Y. Here's where the feedback's really bad. So much of the feedback, if you go and you pulled up 1 million articles on length of time on a behavioral answer, the number one answer would be 1 minute or less. That is insane. There is absolutely no way I can learn anything about you in a minute or less. It's just tough. For a behavioral answer, if you're giving really good answers that have a lot of depth, they're really good projects, they're really juicy, no, a minute, no way. 2 minutes, still way too short in my opinion. I'm not interviewing you for you to tell me one thing about yourself and say, hey, it went great. I really want you to dig into the weeds. So what's my long-winded answer? 3 minutes and 30 seconds is my ideal. Why and how did I come up with that, such a specific timeline? 30 seconds on the situation, 2 minutes on the actions, and 1 minute on the results and learnings. Now, anywhere in that 3 to 4 minute category is really good. Hey, if we're gonna lean away, let's lean towards 3 minutes. It's a much healthier, safer number. But let's talk about the reality of 3 minutes. Let's say you hear 3 minutes and it scares you and you want to shut off this live and you want to go running and you say, Jeff doesn't know what he's talking about. Think about in a 45-minute interview, if every answer was just 3 minutes, how many questions we'd get to? A lot. We'd get to a lot of questions. That's 15 questions if every answer was 3 minutes. Of course, you have to build in time for the question and pausing and all that stuff. But the reality is it's just not too long. And I can tell you at a company like an Amazon, for instance, yeah, they're going to lean a little bit more at 3 minutes because maybe they're not as interested in the learnings or follow-up questions. So it's going to be a little bit more rigid from a star methodology. But that 3 minutes to 3.5 minutes, it's a really, really good wheelhouse. Let me just add a little bit more context here. 30 seconds on the situation, your role in company, what was the process, strategy, technology, client you were working with, and then what's the one thing you needed to solve for. So it's actually the situation and task coupled together, really simplistic. You have to practice that. With the actions, each action should take about 30 seconds. There's 4 major actions: research, and then there's chatting, and then really coupled in that second action, there's chatting and you're starting to do some stuff. Then you test it, then you launch it, present it, MVP, proof of concept, whatever it might be. And then in the results, the initial result, a couple of repeatable items, and then one learning. So the result should be about 30 to 45 seconds. The learning should be nice and succinct. Think about 15 seconds on the learning. You've really got the learning laser focused. I hope that helps. Hey, Jeff, what are some questions you would ask a Salesforce BSA? What are the different rounds for a BSA interview at Google? It's because Salesforce BSA. So I just want to make sure that we're not talking about Salesforce, the organization Salesforce, but that's okay because that's going to be pretty similar to what they do at Google. Salesforce and Google, actually, their interview process is, from what I've seen, it's pretty similar. A nice mix of open-ended and behavioral questions. And Salesforce is an awesome organization. Highly, highly recommended. I get great feedback coming out of that place for the most part. So let's talk about different rounds for a BSA. And this is going to be pretty straight up for the most part. It's going to be your role-related knowledge. It's going to be googliness and leadership. And then there's going to be a GCA. Now, some of these roles will go a little bit more into the design side. That's a little less common. But again, sometimes there's a stretch. There's not this one like very, very rigid methodology. There is a tiny bit of flexibility in some of this interview process. Like if they feel like they want to throw in another one, or maybe the hiring manager is really engaged in the process. So you actually start off with a phone interview with the hiring manager, and then you go into those 3 interviews. It's not 100% rigid. That's been my experience, not only when I work there, but with my clients. Like 2 people will interview for the same role, and the interview process will be just a little bit different. And again, that can be driven a lot by the hiring manager. It might be driven by your feedback and how you did. But those are really the classic ones, right? The role-related knowledge, googliness and leadership, and the GCA. And they all come with their own challenges for sure. I hope that helps. Thanks, Dinesh. Thanks. Yeah, if anybody wants to like it, please do. We love likes. Okay, and that's what you were looking for. Okay, good. I'm glad. Thank you for that. Okay. Okay, Jess. Recently found your videos and love them. Thank you for that. I have a Google interview on Friday. Any idea what I need to know for web technology technical interview? It's very broad. Oh, yes. For the web tech interview, it is going to be pretty broad. So one of the big areas that I like to talk really briefly about with the Google technical, and sometimes like with this web tech, or sometimes we're just doing all sorts of like non-coding but still technical interviews, is sometimes they go a little bit too foundational, meaning what do you know from the books? It's like going back to college or grad school, and it can be really at that. What I mean by foundational level is it's like book smart. It's like ABC. What do you do with ABC? And it's like, whoa, I haven't done that in 10 years because I've been working the last 10 years. So fundamentals. Go back to that foundational, fundamental level. Think about some of the very, very basics. You're going to get one question that's going to be like, oh, this is so basic. I haven't looked at it since school. So that's one place to start. And then obviously, the more well-rounded you can be in web tech in the specific space, it's going to be better for you. But that would be the one piece of feedback. So the last year I hired technical solutions engineers, some customer engineers, and some of them were like, Jeff, oh, it really foundationally went back to some of those basics. And I heard it time and time and time again. And I've even heard it from my clients recently. So it's something they do. So get those foundations down, and then the closer you can get to the role specificity, the better. I hope that helps. It's those are tough interviews because they cast a really, really wide net. So just be ready for anything. I know that that's really broad feedback, but I hope it helps. Okay, Mohammed. Any tips for a sales RRK interview? Yeah, so this is where you're really going to want to take the hybrid approach. And the hybrid approach is straight up collaboration on one side and tech on the other. Does it sound basic? Yeah, it is. They are really going to test how you work with others, what your people skills are, and then your people skills in correlation with the technology, with process, with strategy. So the big thing with the sales RRK interview is when you get those open-ended questions, really understanding the history of the client relationship is critical. Understanding where they are in the journey. Again, a lot of these sales roles are focused either in the cloud space or ad space. Those are their top two spaces. If it's something else, please let me know. But if you can just focus on correlating those two items, so the collaborative piece, and then building in and implementing a little bit of knowledge in the cloud or ad space or whatever it might be, that duality is going to be really important. Another real way to have success in these RRK interviews and just interviews in general, pre-planned solutions. What do you absolutely 100% know you're going to face in the role? Client challenge, conflict, challenging situation, trying to grow or develop business with a potential customer or client, trying to grow or develop or push internal processes to make the overall sales team better. We know these are up and coming. So what does that mean? What it means is that we really, really need to be learning the tech and then be going back and correlating this in our answers. And we can pre-plan these answers. Like if it's sales for cloud, for instance, you are going to talk about how you might utilize Kubernetes, for example, to help build the client's digital journey. And you are going to learn about it and you are going to think about it. And while it might not be a totally regurgitated solution based on the question, it's going to be pretty close. So I hope that helps. RRKs cast a very wide net. You could have somebody who leans a little bit behavioral. You could have somebody who leans a little bit open-ended. What I tell everybody is if I was going and giving you an RRK interview, you would not get a behavioral question from me. I would just come straight at you and say, boom, 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 boom on the open-ended questions just to test your problem-solving skills. I was a notoriously difficult interviewer, if you can't already guess that. Tough but fair. And so that was a lot to throw at you. I hope that helps. Okay, I recently signed a customer engineer offer at Google. John, congrats. It's awesome. It's game changer. It's so amazing. Congratulations, seriously. Just wanted to chime in and thank Jeff, the team, Follow it for have greater success. Thank you, Jeff and Eirik. And yes, it's not just me. You'll see this name Eirik pop up all the time. He's awesome. And for anybody, team effort. So why do we talk about a team effort? Hey, if you're getting ready for these interviews, have that great teammate. The teammate could be your significant other, could be a friend, current or former colleague. Just say things out loud, practice with another human being. It's going to be so impactful and helpful. And so the more you can have that team in your corner, the more success you'll have. But congratulations, John. Really, really happy to hear it. It'll be a life changer. So I'm really happy for you. Okay. Ooh, okay. All right. I like this question. What are possible interview questions for a scaled abuse analyst, trust and safety? So I'm going to take a quick step back. Trust and safety is a huge growing space. If you have an interest in really figuring out how to make things right on these social media platforms, I can tell you YouTube and Facebook, I saw a huge uptick starting about mid-year last year in these trust and safety roles, and obviously with Google, YouTube, and obviously Facebook, this is a big area. So with scaled abuse analyst, trust and safety, if you are going to scale things, you have to understand prioritization and knowing when to escalate, when to bring other people into the mix. That is going to be absolutely critical. Collaboration, no big shock there, right? So scaled abuse analyst. So, one of the things that one of the questions that I absolutely love, and I can't tell you for sure if they're asking it, but is something between this balance between free speech and safety. Because we have to have these platforms that allow for people to have a voice and say how they feel. But what are we seeing from this correlates well as to what are we seeing from a trending perspective? So like what is really trending in this space? What are the patterns? And is that free speech and safety component, like, is it trending in the wrong direction? Is it trending in a good direction? So lots of escalation, prioritization, patterns, trends, and just knowing how to collaborate. And then again, working in a gray area. That's the biggest challenge with these trust and safety roles, is figuring out how we find the balance. So great role. These trust and safety roles are absolutely critical to allow us to have these platforms, to not be so regulated that we don't have a voice, but also make sure that we're creating this inclusive environment and making sure that people aren't being hurt by what's being put out there. So it's a fine balance and really difficult, really cool role. I hope that helps. Okay, Mohammed. So any tips for a sales RRK interview? And then we're going back. So we're going back to account strategist, account manager roles. So this is, when we talk about sales roles, this is definitely one of our number ones from a client base. We have account strategists and AMs every single week. And my feedback would not change based on that. And actually, when we break down the strategist and account manager role, they're actually foundationally not that different. We're just going to build in a little bit more of the leadership component, more about leading teams, mentoring people, removing roadblocks for your team, for example. That would be more on the AM side, but the rest is all going to be collaborative, client-focused, client-facing. So not too much of a change based on those roles. I hope that helps. Okay. Hi, Jeff. Is there a guideline on when to expect feedback from an interview? Is it normal to hear nothing for 1 to 2 weeks? Wow. Same exact question that we got last week. Is it normal? Yes. Is that okay? It's not. So if you haven't heard back, I mean, obviously, I want you to hang out with us for the last 25 minutes, but if you feel like you need to bounce off, go send that email now. I mean, after we hit 5 business days, if we have not heard back after 5 business days, we gotta touch base, right? That's something that we absolutely have to do. We have to be checking in. Is this on us? Should we take ownership for it? No, we should not. This should not be happening. But our recruiters unorganized and bad at following up? They are. And that's casting a huge generalization. But the reality is that we've all had that experience with a recruiter at one time or another in our career. Follow up, please. And then the cadence would be once you hit 5 days, then it's a trigger every 2 to 3 business days if you haven't heard back. Biggest thing is to keep that messaging kind, just kind and gracious. I'm sure you're busy. I'm really excited. I'm eager to learn more. It is not an indication of positive or negative. It's just an indication that the recruiter's not doing their job and following up with you in a timely manner. So sorry to hear that. I hope that helps. The first thing you do when you hop out of this live is you're going to send that email and say, hey, I'm still really excited. Would love to hear back, get any feedback about what's going on. Okay. Okay, so thanks for answering my question. On Salesforce PSA, not mean Salesforce the company, but projects in Google Cloud that work in the Salesforce platform. Okay, awesome. The one other piece of advice I'll give is just like I love analyst roles, and you do not see it in my background, and I probably should build it back in for where I'm at in my career now. But I was actually an analyst and a lead analyst for 3 years in my career, so I understand the importance of diving into the data, but also that huge piece of collaboration. So you're going to get something like how do you work with difficult salespeople? What happens when salespeople won't give you the information or won't work with you? So some sort of challenging question around getting that data and getting the input that you need to move forward. So just another item to think through. I hope that helps. Sorry, I got a little behind here. Okay. Jeff, can you speak about any experience you have in the automotive program management? How do you think the interview and salary expectations differ from FANG? Okay, so I actually have had more than one person coming from the automotive industry and trying to get into FANG. And then I actually had a client recently this year that was interviewing for, it was kind of like a hybrid program product management role in the automotive industry. Here's the default. The default is that the vast majority of companies are going to focus on behavioral interviewing. It's just the widest lens. If we were to look at all the questions asked at all the companies worldwide, it's going to lean mostly behavioral, some commonly asked questions, of course, like tell me about yourself, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then the last piece is the open-ended piece. So for the automotive industry, I would focus a little bit more in on your behavioral answers and really fine-tune those examples. And then, of course, let's see, especially if it's like a bigger automotive company like a Honda, for example, let's dive into Glassdoor. Let's dive into all the online research that we can to make sure, hey, thematically, are there questions that come up again and again and again? And that's what I do for my clients. If we get this random company that I've never heard of, I'm diving in and doing all the research to make sure that thematically, do they always ask the same questions? Really, really will help you have success, but lean a little bit more behavioral. That's the strongest piece of advice I have, and I hope that helps. Okay. So you mentioned that Google has 4 rounds each for a BSA interview. So that should be GCA, role-related, Googliness, et cetera. So what do they focus on in the phone interview? If it's pieces of all 4 rounds, or do they focus on one predefined area? So typically, that first interview is almost always the first phone interview. Casting a wide net, 90% is going to be with the hiring manager or a peer. So it does kind of act more like an RRK. It just casts that wide net to focus on your role related skills, obviously your people skills. And then there can be a little bit of leadership and googliness in there. Leadership and googliness, there is some RRK in there because obviously you're going to bring up your examples of times you've done this. RRK is by far the one that casts the widest net, meaning they can ask you basically anything. But yeah, I would think in the phone interview, as you think about it, it's almost always what I would consider an RRK interview. I hope that helps. Okay, Jess. Can we have an example of a data-driven solution to a product? Or what an interviewer might mean by a data-driven problem? All these big companies, data is going to be behind the user, for example. They're going to go right to the data. So what do they mean by a data-driven problem? One where you likely had to go down multiple paths to find the data, or there was some ambiguity in the data, or some of the data was missing, but you took the data and components you had to ultimately drive results. So data doesn't necessarily have to be correlated to something that's like super tangible always. Sometimes data could just be about collaborating with others and getting insights from all the history that's happened at the organization. Now, is that technically data? Of course it is. But data driven is going to be numbers driven, percentages driven, information driven, of course, but don't forget about the people component as well. If you are interviewing at a company like a Google, the chances of you not getting a data question are very, very low. Data is going to come up in at least one question for sure. And this is a great sidebar. The team that I got the most hires for in my entire time at Google was the data center deployments team. These were program managers and technical program managers. And one of the hiring managers that I supported would always say they didn't know how to show how they drove results with data. So what does that mean? It means get into the weeds a little bit. What did you really do with the data? How was that data important and impactful? But not the story of the data as much as how you got it, what you did with it, how you shared it, and how it drove the ultimate results. I know that was bouncing around a lot, but I really hope that helps. Great question. Oscar. Okay, Oscar. Yeah, sorry. You posted this in the Slack group this morning and definitely glad that you're throwing it in here. Thank you for that. After a nice talk to a hiring manager, is it okay to send a thank you note for your time as a LinkedIn contact request? I think it's okay. I don't think it's a negative. We don't always know how people are going to respond to connecting with them on a social platform. So it can be slightly safer to send a thank you note either through email if you were able to get their email, or forward that through a recruiter. Those are two facets and two ways we can do it. But I don't see any real challenge with it. Just to say, hey, would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Great conversation. Love chatted about A, B, and C. It also, the real positive here is that it absolutely limits the number of characters you can use. So that could be really good for just keeping you on point and succinct. So I don't disagree with it, but again, just understanding who that person was, if they were really warm and open and friendly, okay, maybe a little bit safer bet than somebody who maybe was not quite as open and friendly. So I would say it's okay. Okay, so what is the difference between RCA versus behavioral versus open-ended versus RRK? Because all of these cover open-ended questions. Okay, so the first one, I don't know why, but many people put an R in front of GCA, so it's they put RCA. It's actually GCA, so it's general cognitive ability, And what does that really mean? It's your ability to problem solve. Behavioral questions are not open-ended questions. So let's cast a wide net. Let's take a step back. So behavioral questions are going to be, tell me about a time when, give me an example of, what happened when you got into X scenario. So it's really calling for you to bring out something for your past. So let's table those. Those are example-based answers. Now, in a GCA interview, an RRK interview, a Googliness and leadership interview, you will be asked open-ended questions in all of them. And so the open-ended questions that come in an RRK or a Googliness and leadership are probably going to be more straight up simplistic. They're going to put you in a scenario or say, what would you do in X scenario, or how would you do X? Really kind of a little more basic. Now in the GCA interview, typically, let's talk about what happens about 70% of the time. About 70% of the time, you will get 2 open-ended questions. One will be random, like open a pastry shop. And we're not anticipating it, we're not expecting it. And then the second one will be a more in-depth, probably more role-specific open-ended question. Usually it's only 2, sometimes it's 3, and occasionally your GCA interview will have a behavioral question in there. But the open-ended questions in a GCA interview are different. They're intended to be one bigger question, and then they'll have a list of follow-up questions as well. So the intent, more probing, and how do you have success in the GCA interview? 2 ways. Whatever that random question is, however random it is, you stick with the CFS methodology, and in the solution, you keep it as role specific as possible. That's one. And then secondarily, just lots of check-ins, lots of back and forth. Because remember, they have a plan of questions, of follow-up questions that they're going to want to ask you. So really building in space for them to ask those questions is going to be really valuable and impactful. I hope that helps. Oh, okay. Eric, thanks for chiming in. We're talking about data and data sets. So you want to stay up to date with current policy. Yes. So there are a bunch of policies that are coming out. So that's a great piece of feedback, Eric. Thanks for chiming in on that. Absolutely. There's governance and there's regulations. So that will be a piece of context that you'll want to bring into your answers for sure. Apart from tell me about a time you had to solve a difficult problem, what are some other behavioral questions they can ask? So Jess, this is casting a super wide net. But I love the question because usually there's only a handful of focus areas. So one is this failure, challenge, conflict question, right? It's something difficult situation, difficult problem, etc. It's this one challenging item that happened, and they're going to want a behavioral answer for that. Usually they're going to want something that is incredibly collaborative. So doing the cross-functional work, that could be internal, external, or both. Usually there's behavioral questions around process. So building a process, breaking down a process, making tweaks to a process. Strategy. How were you involved in the strategy? How did you grow the strategy? How did you collaborate to make that strategy better? And then technology and tools. How did we utilize technology? How do we utilize tools to better develop things, etc.? So that is obviously at the most basic level, some of the areas that they're trying to cast a wide net. But one of the best advantages and one of the easiest things to do in and with behavioral questions is, what's the theme? If you can say, okay, they're asking me about something focused on collaboration. Why is that so important? Because then you can stretch the question a little bit. If you don't have the ideal answer, you could say something like, Sue, I think the basis of this question is really focused on how I collaborate. And so I have an example that's pretty close. It's focused on X. Is it okay if I go ahead and give you that example? You're going to get permission from Sue. Sue's never going to say, no, you need to have the specific example. You either have it or you don't. So if you can think about these overarching themes, it allows you to implement your behavioral answers a little bit more simplistically. So really good question. Obviously, the answer is it's endless, but there absolutely are categories. So thanks for asking. Jeff, can you please share a few examples of possible GCA interview questions? How long should one expect to wait for an HC decision? Okay, so obviously when it comes to GCA questions, let's throw a few out there. It's fun. Okay, so the open a pastry shop, I love that one. That is happening all across the board, especially on the Google Cloud side for like sales engineers, architects, etc. Seeing that question all the time. Now, another one could be maybe a little bit more design focused, like Google is looking to occupy the 99th and 100th floors of a 100-story building. How would you design the elevator? And people think, well, that's for product, but actually there's a lot of other roles where you could implement and bring in some solutions. So that's another one I've heard. I've heard a recent one about an insurance company is looking to bring new parents to buy, an insurance company is looking for new parents to buy life insurance. How do you help that company attract these parents? That's another one. Remember, the biggest key with GCA questions, especially the random ones, is not what the question is. It's about sticking to a methodology. We're going to clarify, we're going to framework, and then we're going to solve wearing the hat of the role. And so what does that mean, solve wearing the hat of the role? It really means that we don't want to get so far away from our position. So with the open a pastry shop position question, so many people focus on location, but their role might have nothing to do with location. So that's really huge, right? We just don't want to get so pulled away from what seems important. We want to keep it as close to the role as possible. That's going to help them visualize you in the role and therefore have success. Second question, how long should one expect to wait for an HC decision? You should know the exact day that hiring committee is meeting and the exact time. And right after that meeting, you should be getting a phone call. So if I had a candidate at Google, I'd say, hiring committee's meeting at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. I will call you at 11:01 to let you know the result. And if I had two people, I'd say, hey, I have two people. One person's getting a call at 11:01 and the next person's getting a call at 11:05 or 11:10. So you should have that specific details and information. If they haven't told you that, again, that's on them to provide a little bit more information and clarity. I hope both those answers helped. Okay, what sort of questions would you recommend to ask interviewers at the end of an interview when they ask, do you have any questions? I will post when I fill in the comments and fill all the questions in the YouTube description, the video. That video now, it's getting a little bit on the older end. And so I've changed my approach just a little bit. I really like softball questions. Not everybody agrees with this approach. It doesn't have to be super, super soft, but it has to be positive. So my first question is always going to be, what do you love the most about working here? Uptick in positivity. What are some of the fun and unique challenges that you're facing or working on right now? Uptick. And then it could transition eventually to you and say, what are some of the cool projects that I'll get to work on with other team members? Or what do you see upcoming that might be really fun for me to get involved in? Fun opportunities, fun challenges, all this stuff. Oftentimes, we're going to have only time for one or two questions. So remember what happens. Questions come at the very, very end of the interview. Have them walking out, or in this case, shutting off their video and thinking, oh, I really like Mohammed. Like, that was awesome. Like, he was so positive. And you can really win them over just in those last couple of minutes with positive questions. So don't come at them with really challenging and difficult questions. People think this is a great way to show strong interest, but you can really set somebody off. So I like to play it a little bit safer in this category. There are areas where you can take risk, but I don't believe that this is one where you really should. Even with the hiring manager, let's say you meet with the hiring manager and you get a chance to have a lot of questions. First of all, you never run out of questions, but let's say they're really interested in you, but you're not sure about the role. You're going to have another chance to ask the hiring manager some tougher questions that maybe you don't get in this initial interview. So I like the little softer approach. Not everybody agrees with that strategy, but I'm just trying to use science and psychology. When somebody finishes a conversation really positively with me, that's how I remember them. I hope that helps. All right, Jam Jam, love that name. Hi, I learned a lot from your videos. Thank you for the amazing content. The Google interview soon for a project coordinator role. Can you tell me one question to expect? Oh, this is awesome. We got 2 project coordinators in this live. That's amazing. So yes, prioritization, absolutely. How you manage and deal with competing priorities, because in a coordination role, you're going to have a lot thrown at you. How do you delegate? How do you push things off to other people? How do you collaborate and work with others? Those are a few guaranteed questions. And then you're going to get some sort of conflict question and definitely like a failure or mistake question as well. So those are maybe 4 or 5 questions that I would anticipate or expect. Remember, coordination roles are all about your organizational skills and your ability to collaborate across teams, across groups. And then lastly, actually, I didn't mention this before, so let's mention this now, proactivity. In a coordination role, you just want to get in front of everything. So if your recruiter is Jane and you're helping them work with something, or you're helping a PM work with something, just get in front of it. So you want to have examples of times where you've been proactive and just kind of send that message, send that approach. Because I really want to work with a coordinator who gets in front of things and is always actively messaging. That's going to be really helpful as well. I hope that helps. Okay. Hey Jeff, when will this love be posted on YouTube? So it's posted now. So that's the benefit of live, is that it's up and available for anybody to see, and these will stay up. And what I try to do is I try to timestamp all the questions that come in, because I want you to see consistently what's coming up and what people are asking. And it is a lot of the same stuff, but we're learning and growing and developing. And I think that's the same thing I can say for Iric and I. We learn every week from our clients. So we get a little bit of this different lens, but we will go back and timestamp anything. If we mention a video, we'll put that video in the content. So that usually takes a little while, but the video's up and you can go. And one of the pieces that I love to tell people, and Iric and I both do this, we watch everything on 2x. And as you've noticed, I'm low, I'm slow, I pause a lot. So if you want to get through a lot of good content, especially on the career stuff, 2x me, 1.5x me. Some of the stuff I know has some complexity, but if we could speed through, go fast, sometimes we can get a lot of tidbits at a faster pace, because I know I'm a little bit low and slow. Okay. Hi, Jeff. Today I had an interview, and one of the interview sent me his email. Do you think I can email him with questions on how was the interview? I would not ask questions on how the interview went in that email, but I would send a thank you note. And remember, with thank you notes should never go over 4 to 5 sentences. Thank you so much for your time today. I enjoyed discussing X, Y, and Z. I also wanted to mention that I did have the opportunity to work on A or B. Looking forward to next steps. That's it. Thank you note should be really, really easy and simplistic. Yep, it's posted. It's there. So if you go on to like the second we finish, YouTube will just recycle it. So you'll be able to rewatch it if you want to. Oh, yes. Okay. Hi, Jeff. Can you talk about what you can expect from a technical account manager RRK interview? Will this lean heavily on coding? So technical account managers at Google are referred to as TAMs. Hands down, one of the coolest roles. Basically, you're a program manager that does a lot of client facing work. I love working with TAMs. It's absolutely one of my favorite roles. Um, no, you should not have any coding in your RRK. Um, you need to ask your recruiter. I have not seen coding come up. Typically for TAMs, the more technical stuff is more domain specific. But if you were going to have that coding component, it's usually not going to be in an RRK. I haven't had a TAM client in probably like 2 months. So I can't remember exactly. I always don't exactly remember what all the interviews are, but you should not expect coding in your ROK. But this is just a great pause moment. You should know what every interview is and what every interview is going to cover. And we just got to ask our recruiters and push on our recruiters. And if they say, hey, I can't answer that, it's like, well, yeah, you can. You can give me a little bit more detail or specificity about what's going to happen here. And obviously, when you say that, say it in a really nice and gracious way. But our recruiters should be providing this information up front. We should not go into these interviews guessing. And if you are, you need to take a little bit of ownership to go back and say, hey, they didn't tell me that information. Let me go find out the answers. I hope that helps. Okay, can you please explain a little bit more on how I can structure an answer on proactiveness with examples? Well, on one side, I can't, because on one side, it's just going to be your behavioral answers. So I want you to think about times where you have been proactive, where you saw a challenge upcoming and you reached out or you created a really good process. So on that side, I just want you to pause and reflect back and say, hey, what are some times I've been proactive? Now, on the open ended side, if it's a question like, how are you proactive? I know that that's a really basic question. You might say, well, proactive in what sense? And then you would dive into more specificity, asking whether it's people, process, strategy, technology. You'd really want to kind of understand the foundation of what you were looking at. And then with proactiveness, this is where the operational framework would come in really, really helpful. You'd say, well, when I understand and think about being proactive, I want to understand the goals and objectives and how it correlates to what we've done in the past. I'd absolutely want to understand the timeline. That's going to be important, the overall scope and scale, and who I'm working with from a stakeholder perspective. Then in the solution, you would want to get as role specific as possible. So you'd really want to dive into what are some of the steps you can take to be proactive, and whether that's creating, again, a really good process that might be like an email template process. That could be something like building a Slack group where everybody has this one place to go for updates or whatever it might be. That's one of the ways I might tackle one of those open-ended questions. I know we're trying to cast a pretty wide net, so I hope that helps. Okay, Jess, this is a fun question. I've seen this question. I've heard this question. So for anybody out there who might be in like a customer success role, something like that, this is a question that's coming up. It's like, how do we increase it from X percentage to Y percentage? Without a budget, this is the collaboration question, and it's collaboration coupled with historical data. What do I mean by that? You have to understand what has been the most successful with this customer or client in the past, and really try and develop and grow on that strategy. Or it's about really sitting with them and seeing that lens of something that you've never tried before. Don't need additional budget to grow 10%, 20%, 30%. You just need to be really learning from the people who you're working with, and then taking that historical data and really pushing it out. So I know that that's really pretty high level, but if I'm going to help anybody, I need to sit and talk with them, understand what's gone well in the past, what hasn't gone well, and we're going to really pivot and focus on all the stuff that has gone well and push that to really drive results. And we don't always need additional budget to do that. Again, I know that that's a pretty simplistic answer, but I hope it helps. Brandon, love your content. Thanks. I have my first phone interview for an associate account strategist at Google with an internal recruiter. What should I expect from the interview? So that is not technically what I would call an interview. It's a screen. So that's nice. So the one thing that you can say is now you can just go and just relax a little bit, because the conversation with a recruiter is going to be a little bit more basic. It's going to be casual. The one really important item to remember is this is not a scored interview. So it's not an interview, it's a screen. And what do you want to do in that conversation? You want to be really nice and kind. You want to communicate really strongly. You want to listen. So make sure you're allowing them to complete all their phrases, sentences, really build in that listening and pausing space. And then just making sure that you're highlighting a few of your key skills in the best manner. And so obviously you want to go through the job description and really see what the position wants, look for those keywords and themes, and be mentioning and talking about those items as much as you can in that conversation. But for these types of roles, they're having that conversation because they already like you. They're just really trying to test a couple of domain skills and make sure that you're a strong communicator. And if you can do those two things, you'll do great. We get a lot of clients who come in who really want to prep for these recruiter screens. And it's like, well, it's just a softball intro conversation. Rarely are recruiters coming after you and challenging you in these conversations. It's pretty rare. Okay. I've been laid off because of COVID. I'm sorry to hear that. Would that be an issue with Google? How can I present a positive answer to that? Just be positive. You are one of millions of people who are impacted. And again, I'm sorry to hear it, but it's not going to impact whether you get hired by Google. But great point. What will impact it is how you respond to it. And you could say, look, I was one of many, and I had a really great experience at my previous company. I was first in, so I was first out, or whatever the reason it happened. And then you could say, what I've done in the time since I left was I took this as an opportunity to really build my skill set in X, Y, or Z. And I did that by reading all these books, taking all these courses, et cetera. So you want to focus on the positivity of the great experience you had and not hold them accountable or be upset. It was just a thing that happened to the world. And then focus on some of the things and actions that you've taken since that occurred. And that should be great, but nobody's going to ding you for getting laid off because of COVID. And the reality is that we live in a different world now. And so these short moves and leaving companies and jumping around and going from one companies and having gaps, it's less important than it's ever been. These FANG companies don't care. If you're in the interview process, they're talking to you for a reason. They like you already. They think you have the background to do the job, so you just need to crush the interview. Will Google make me demonstrate skills on an application like Salesforce? Remember you saying Google will have face-to-face interviews afterwards, but in current situation, is that still happening? Have me demonstrate skills on applications. No, they might have a question about whether you've utilized a tool like a Salesforce, but they're not going to make you demonstrate that you do know how to use it. They actually don't do a lot of anything in a system. Everything's kind of Google Doc, whiteboard, like really, really simplistic and basic. So you'll never have to say, oh, I can use Salesforce and let's pull it up and share our screens and have me show you how. So you don't have to worry about that. Hey, Rochelle, just want to throw you up there. Nice to see you. Okay. Let's see. Hi, Jeff. I got an email from a Google recruiter for a role that is close to the one I did not succeed at some time ago. Is it possible this recruiter takes my interview history into account from the database? 100%. So what does that mean? That means that you did well last time. I probably won't reach out to the person that interviewed for that same role a year or 2 years ago who really didn't do well. So this is good news. It means there's some positive data, some positive feedback, but did they look at that information? 100%. They absolutely looked at that info. So everything when you interview at these companies, now again, I can't speak for every company, but I can speak for Google. Your information never leaves you. It always stays with you. It always sticks with you. So just something to keep in mind. You will always, always have this data stay with you. So that's why it's so important that you have amazing and positive interactions. Even if you don't do perfect, you'll have opportunities like this to have second chances. And that's pretty common. Actually, the percentages show that when you interview at a company like a Google the second or third time, your percentage chances of getting the job actually go up. Okay. Hey, Jeff, if they asked how you would debug a slow internet, what types of clarifying questions would you ask? So I always foundationally start in the same place when it comes to clarifying questions, because for me, the new versus existing always works. So if I'm asked to debug a slow internet, the first thing I want to know is I want to know if I've ever seen this bug before, yes or no. I want to understand who I'm collaborating and correlating with to debug a slow internet. Is this a person on my team? Is this a person from engineering? Was this flagged by somebody on the marketing team, etc.? So I want to know new versus existing. I want to know who, and I want to know the urgency. Is this a high impact bug or a low impact bug? Now, slow internet, obviously nobody wants a slow internet, but those are a few really good clarifying questions. I always want to know if I've seen it before. Let's not try and reinvent the wheel. That historical data is always going to be important. I always want to know who am I working with, who's helping me, how are we solving this together, because rarely do we do things in a silo. And then the last piece is maybe scope and scale, overall impact, urgency, timeline. Those are all good types of questions. With clarifying questions, remember, either or yes or no questions. Clarifying questions are actually technically providing your interviewer with data. If we provide either or yes or no questions, that's data, that's information. We think that we're not actually starting to answer the question with clarifying questions, but we are if we present it in that manner. I hope that helps. Okay, I mean, do they see a possible improvement according to the existing interview data and expect I will have a better one than last time? Yep. They're expecting you to be better because, like you mentioned, it's been some time since you've stepped away. So they're expecting that your overall skill set has increased. And, hopefully you've been able to do some good interview prep, but they're really thinking about it from a skill set perspective. You've had some time to step away. You've gained and grown your skills in your career, and now it's another chance to interview. So yes, they are expecting that you have grown and that you are better. Yeah, for sure, of course. I remember you, and awesome. Okay, so I want to just address this. Where can I get into the question bank? So if you go onto our website, we're now allowing people to log in and create an account and get to our question bank. There's a question bank, there is a course, and there is a beta AI tool. You guys, Eric and I just keep saying this to each other, get after it. It's not going to be free for forever. We're putting a lot of money and time into engineering to really improve it. But while it's in beta, we're giving it away for free, and we want you to use it. We love giving stuff away for free. So please check it out. So you can just go to the webpage, log in, you'll create an account, and then we'll show you and take you to that information. Thank you. I started a YouTube channel after being laid off. Is this something I can include in my response? Sure. If it's relevant and specific to the role. right? If it correlates well to the role, then yes, absolutely. If it's a random one-off on how you do something that's completely random, it may not make as much sense. The interview should be work focused. So if it's correlated and you're gaining and growing some skills that are really going to be helpful in the job, then absolutely. And that could be something as simplistic as learning how to up your communication skills. And one of the ways you've done that is by starting a YouTube channel. So yes, just make sure it ties right back to the role. Okay. Google interview wise, how many questions do they normally have for GCA and tech interviews? And so for GCA interviews, typically two open-ended questions, one random or one role specific, typically. And for tech questions, that's across the board. It really depends on the role. If you have a very technical interview, it can be, if you have a very technical interview, you could end up getting a lot of questions if it was straight technical questions. Okay. This is going to be, I think, the last question. We'll see if any other questions come in, but I think we're going to end here. So, what is the best way to answer? Tell me about yourself. And so, I created a video. It was, I think, the second video I ever did, but I haven't really changed that philosophy. The goal with Tell Me About Yourself is not walk me through your resume. They're actually two separate questions. Walk me through your resume is talking about your background. Tell me about yourself is identifying and correlating the key skills and strengths needed to be successful in that role. You want to identify 3 themes that are really important and close to the role, things you're going to have to do in the position, and that's what you're going to talk about. So if we got some form of position, you'd say, look, Sue, my 3 key strengths, and as they correlate really well with the role, are problem solving, coordination, and collaboration. As I see the position, as I see the role, those are the 3 key skills and strengths that are going to lead to success. Now, I don't know if anything's changed since the role has been posted or based on your needs or who you've been interviewing. Happy to dive into any one of those areas, but all 3 are important. I think all 3 are really connected for me. Now, again, that's not the perfect answer. I would want to craft it and cater it, but 3 items that connect really well to the role, that are themes that are important for the role, connected to your strengths, and 1 minute or less. Thank you, everybody, so much for showing up. We care about you. We appreciate you. Thanks for being a part of our community. If you like the content, hit that subscribe button. We release new videos every Tuesday around noon Pacific time, and then every Wednesday, 10 a.m. We're going to do these lives, and we'll go as long as the questions keep coming in. So thank you so much. Take care, and let us know if we can help in any